Welcome to another celebration of Halloween in Guild Wars 2, as it appears that the Howling Mad King, the fellow on the side here with the burning pumpkin head, has a kid who looks like a terrifying emo clown with spikes sticking out of his chest. So we're gonna go into this and more after the break. See you on the other side. Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to another MMO Anthropology, and I am your host, Amarist, and we are in Guild Wars 2 during the Blood and Madness event, the Halloween event for Guild Wars, which is the second one that they've done. In the first one, which I described in a video back in 2012, we went up against this fellow here with the flaming head and the interesting moon shield, which I happen to love, and now we are introduced to what appears to be his kid, who, as it turns out, he crammed into a box at some particular point and starved him to death. Of course, he seems to have shoved candy corn in his son's mouth before he locked him in the box and starved him to death, but that apparently was some part of a particularly sick joke. And so now his son is back from the dead, or at least out of the box that his father stuck him in, and is trying to usurp his father's holiday. Back also is the haunted Halloween doors that were appearing across the landscape in Queensdale. The weird candy cane nodes that you could mine as if they were iron or something else. And also the various things in the labyrinth. The Mad King's Labyrinth, this is where we are now, such as the candy corn elementals, which have seized the day, these glowing skeletons that you can see below, as well as gargoyles and plastic skeletons. I think I probably also... plastic spiders, which kind of bop along, kind of like those rings that you get in trick-or-treat packages during Halloween and etc. Let me bring up the UI again. Also, they've added a series of particularly creepy and very Halloween-like bosses to the maze. Let's see if I can't see any. I can't see any at the moment. Well, in particular, there are three of them. One of them is a giant candy corn elemental called Viscount Candy Corn. There's one that is basically just a giant skeleton with a chainsaw, who I'll hopefully be showing you at some point. And finally, there's a Lich, which I have never gotten a good look at because it's always raising a giant number of skeletons, and people are always trying to rush over it. As with most of the content of Guild Wars 2, these bosses in the maze can only be overcome with extremely large groups, and these extremely large groups are often led by commanders, which you can see a commander tag right here. Commander Keanu Reeves, of all people. And for the most part, the skeleton with the vroom vroom, the one with the chainsaw is the easiest, although he's melee and has a tendency to wipe out entire groups. The Viscount Candy Corn can be a little bit tough, even for these giant Zergs that Guild Wars 2 prefers, because he uses a particular style of mechanics that requires people to actually pay attention to the ground and res one another when they go down. The Candy Corn boss has a tendency to splot out big blops of candy corn goo on the ground that you need to stand in, or it kills you with these candy corn artillery strikes. And it could even kill even a near tank like the character that I'm showing you right now in one hit, so it takes a little bit of coordination. But what really takes a lot of coordination is the Lich, who's constantly beaming in new skeletal minions who are always attacking you left and right, because it also has a lifesteal that has a tendency to suck life from people around it into itself, and so as a result it's really difficult to burn down. However, with these extremely large raid groups, these huge Zergs that are rushing through these monsters, eventually they can be worn down, even the Lich, but it takes a certain amount of actual discussion between the commander and the people trying to fight them. And one of them is the fact that when it comes to the Lich, there's a certain amount of people trying to figure out how to take it down. There's lots of discussion on the forums right now of the tactics that are necessary, but large groups, Zergs especially in the open world, are kind of like super pug raids with 20 to 30 people all at once, and they don't communicate very well. Instead, they're these giant amorphous onrushing groups that depend on the fact that everyone in it might know what they're doing. But the Lich, as a result, certainly a number of people could all come together to deal with it if they all knew what they were doing, but instead it takes larger groups and a better commander to take them out. And it's an interesting dichotomy between how commanders work in World versus World, which is kind of a Zerg versus Zerg PvP combat, and this PvE content that we see right now in the Mad King's Labyrinth. So let me show you a couple clips of the different bosses, and we'll see what else is going on, but fundamentally, not very much about the game has changed, and maybe I'll discuss a little bit about how ArenaNet is taking the external culture of Halloween and reintroducing it into the game. I mean, if nothing else, like, you know, flaming pumpkins, emo kid from hell, all that sort of thing. So I'll see you shortly. Spooky! Okay, so I figured that I would just wrap this up in Lion's Arch, which is now decked out in all the Halloween festivities that you might expect. I wanted to do it here because look at this. Hanging jack-o'-lantern, cut jack-o'-lanterns, glowing, etc. It is definitely as if ArenaNet thought about how people celebrate Halloween in the United States and all the trappings that come along with it. I did show this off last year, right down to the bats, I believe. But this includes pumpkin carving as part of a daily. Like last year, you could actually get some sort of an achievement by carving pumpkins across the land. There are lots of different interesting-looking, scary cuts into these gourds and pumpkins. There's even scarecrows. There's elements of the harvest, which we see in the American Halloween traditions. Floating candles, and of course there's the Mad King's Cauldron in the center, which if you leap into will put a costume on you and will allow you to engage in costume brawl, which is from last year as well. Many of these elements are being remediated by ArenaNet and then regenerated or like reincorporated into the culture that is a part of the world of Guild Wars. So much in the same ways that World of Warcraft took elements from the external Halloween culture, especially American culture, and generated the Headless Horseman events, in CSoft, ArenaNet is taking Halloween-style thoughts and tropes from the external culture, from American culture, such as the jack-o'-lantern, and adding it to the Mad King, because in this version, jack-o'-lanterns and etc. are not generated because of some ancient tradition of the Celtic peoples or Ireland, where gourds were cut with candles inside in order to either scare away spirits and to carry spirits from one world to the other. Instead, as the other world comes close, in these festivities, the Mad King rises, and he had a thing for pumpkins, as well as the moon, and now on his shield, and etc. And now his son is entered into it, which it adds even more to the legends and the apparent fictional culture that's been generated inside of Guild Wars 2 about the Tyrians and their events and their lore and etc., which enables the players to have an even greater sort of immersion in the culture that's been developed by Guild Wars 2 about the game itself. And they themselves get a chance to interact with it using the mechanics of the game. So here we are going for, let me bring my UI back and then I'll show you, going for particular Living World, Blood and Madness, trying to be part of the different things added, such as Sweet Friend, or Death to the Undying, and etc. These are all achievements that you can only gain during this particular Halloween event. Oh, I almost have that one, or at least part of it. And as a result, it's a way for the players to connect with the game and also with the game's sort of universe at the same time. But that's all the time that I've got for today. I can see that my poor little engineer is getting bored because I've been talking for too long. Thank you all for coming along. Good night and good dreams. Well, thank you all for coming along to this Halloween-themed Guild Wars 2 MMO Anthropology. I hope that this has found you well, and you have gotten a little bit from this interesting foray into the world of Guild Wars 2 and the Blood and Madness Halloween event. If you've gotten along this far, hopefully you've learned some interesting things, are interested in the Halloween event in Guild Wars 2, and you should tell me about what you think of it and what you've been doing for your MMO experience during Halloween. Give me a like, it'll help me out. Drop a comment. Favorite if you can. And you should do that, because if you don't, all your Halloween doors will evaporate like that one just did.